And welcome. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. And we are in the midst of Parsha vaYetzei. We're talking about Jacob's sojourn with his uncle Laban, and that is his mother's brother. And we're in the midst of all that and how he falls in love with Rachel, right? So that's kind of where we're at in the story for now. Let me turn that to that and share the screen with you. So we are talking about the fact that Jacob, of course, has nothing, right? And he makes a bargain with Laban that he will work as a shepherd for Laban. He will work for Laban for 7 years, and in exchange, Laban will allow him or give him Rachel to marry. And that's where we're at now. They've struck the bargain, and he's worked 7 years. He worked the 7 years, and now he's told Laban, "Bring my wife," etc. So here we are. vaYe'esof Laban et kol anshe hamakom. So Laban gathered all the people of the place. Vayas mishteh, and he made a feast. So, there's no Rashi on this until verse 25. Vayhi va'erev, and they feasted. Can imagine they drank quite a bit too. Vahi va'erev, and so it was in the evening. Vayikech et Leah bito. He took Leah, his daughter. Vayave ota elav, and he brought her to him, being of course Jacob. Vayavo eleha. Literally means he came to her, but of course it means he was intimate with her. Vayiten Lavan la, and Laban gave to her et Zilpa shivchato. He gave her Zilpa, his maidservant, the Leah bito, to Leah, his daughter, Shivcha, as a maidservant. Vayhi vaboker, and morning came, vahine hi Leah, and behold, it was Leah. Vayomer el Lavan, and he said to Laban, Jacob said to Laban, Ma zot asita li, what did you do? What's this that you did to me? Hello, did I not? Rachel avadati imach, did I not work for you for Rachel? Valama rimitani, and why did you cheat me? Why did you deceive me? We are seeing the turning of the screw. Right, such an interesting theme of these last two parshiot. Right, Vahiva Vokehinehi Leah. So I think part of what's going to prompt Rashi and obviously our sages on whom Rashi is basing the following comment, is the fact that he only found out in the morning. And if it wasn't Rachel, how come it took him so long for him to figure this out? Here we go. Aval balayla lo haita Leah. So and even the language, right? It says he Leah, it was Leah, but this is what we'd call a diuk on the part of the commentary. In other words, it's looking at something in an unusual, sort of in a specific way. It says, she was Leah in the morning, aval balayla, but at night, lo haita Leah. It wasn't. She wasn't Leah. How? In what way? Lefi shemasar Yaakov simanin lerachel, because Jacob had given indications to Rachel, signs to Rachel. Before I go on with that, the point was, did Jacob know who he was dealing with? Did he know that Laban was a cheat? He did. And to prevent that from happening, he had given these signs to Rachel to make sure that if she had these like secret signs, he would know, in fact, it was Rachel. So how did it go wrong? Here we go. Rachel. Shemachnisin lo Leah. And when Rachel saw that they were bringing Leah into him, Amra, she thought to herself, Achshav, now, tikalem uchati, my sister will be humiliated, right? Amda, so she arose, umasra la, and she gave to her, that is to Leah, Rachel gave to Leah, otan simanim, those very signs, those secret signs. And this is in the Tractate Megillah, Yud Gimel, in the page 13 of Tractate Megillah. So interesting issue going on here, because in a sense, of course, Rachel was cooperating in the deception of Jacob, and yet on the other hand, her motivations were actually unbelievably noble under the circumstances. And of course, on the other level, as we will see in a moment, that, as I said, the turning of the screw, this is going to be a watershed moment, essentially, for the rest of Jacob's life. The Jacob who cheated his brother out of his birthright and his blessing is going to have to accept payback time. And there is a general understanding that when we say Adonai Eloheinu, when we say about this transcendent creative force, that we accept not only its existence, but its judgment of our lives. That is part of the very essence of being a Jewish person, is to accept divine judgment and to recognize God's kindness and wisdom, even in the midst of what seems to be very adversarial circumstances, and to accept it as divine judgment that is there either to allow us to make restitution for whatever harm we've caused this world, and to cleanse ourselves so that we can gain immortality. And that's, in a way, what we're seeing now as Jacob being the patriarch of the third and final patriarch of the three patriarchs, is that his life is quite unique compared to the other patriarchs, compared to Abraham and Isaac, in that he has to recognize what he did. And it's a great quality if we're able to gain that understanding and accept it, and accept our relationship to God in this particular way. So, going on.
Could I
Yeah,
ask a
please.
question?
Of course.
So I don't know. I don't know if it's about the trauma of the Jewish people, but if God's judgment is, we're so hard on ourselves. I don't know if it's anxiety, whatever. It's like it is, some kind of a coping mechanism to judge yourself harshly, but it doesn't work well. It doesn't help you improve your behavior or be willing to do the right thing. It gets in the way a lot. And, that isn't addressed in thinking about God's judgment.
Okay, I hear you. So the issue isn't necessarily harshly, and I think there's in some ways a modern kind of approach to that. I would say it's judging fairly. In other words, for Jacob to realize that what was happening to him was happening, as you'll see in Laban's words to him, by the way, are quite telling, as to saying, no, I had this coming to me. And whether or not one sees that as harsh or one sees that as fair, I guess, at least speaking personally, and perhaps because my life has been so privileged, on so many levels, that instead of, that in accepting these sorts of things, it allows actually me to feel a certain joy in my heart as opposed to an anger. In other words, the sort of why me, Lord attitude is not helpful, right? And rather saying, well, help me understand why these things are happening so that I can judge myself better. And by the way, I had read a really interesting and wonderful explanation of the word lehit palel, which many people know means to pray. That's the general translation. And it's reflexive, lehit palel, right? And it's interesting. And that's because it actually means to judge yourself. And if you think of it in the context of the prayer book and so many of the prayers and the values that those prayers are trying to, forgive me for using the word, to inculcate into us and to make those part of our DNA, um, life is a process of perfecting oneself and being able to accept criticism and especially being open to self-criticism, not in the harsh way that you're describing, Judith, because I would agree with you. Just being hard on yourself, by the way, sometimes is a way of trying to excuse bad behavior, but rather in a calm way, thinking through all the dynamics that are involved. And I don't know that this really helps, you know, respond to the issue that you're raising, but at least that's the way I tend to look at it. And I'm going to let you respond if you'd like. I think there's a level of acceptance here, and that allows a certain inner peace and allows one the strength to go on. Well, feel free to raise this again if you want. Okay. I mean, I know it's complicated. All right. So anytime you want. Going on. So Jacob has confronted Laban, right? Why? Lama rimitani. Why did you cheat me? Right? Vayomer Lavan. Laban said, Lo yasechen bimkomenu. We don't. This is not the practice in our place. La tet hatza'ira, to give the younger one lifnei habechira, before the bechira, the firstborn. Right? That's not our practice. Well, what exactly has Jacob been doing before he had to run off to Laban? Right? Isn't that exactly what he was doing? But it's complicated. It's not simple, right? The outstanding question is ultimately, did Jacob do what was the right thing to do? And is it saying that sometimes, the path to righteousness isn't such a simple path, right? Does it have more to do with experience and the ability to face life in all its complexities? I don't have a simple answer. So interesting. So going on, let me make sure I have taken care of Rashi's here. No. Okay, we got another verse to go. Malay Shvuazot, this is Laban speaking to Jacob. Fulfill this week, or the week of this one. That's how it's not, Shavua means 7, right? So fulfill the week of this one, Zot being feminine, referring to Leah's week. V'nitna lecha gam et zot, okay, and I will give to you this one too, referring, of course, to Rachel. But avodah asher ta'avodi madi, for the service that you will serve me, with which you will serve me, od sheva shanim acherot, another 7 years. Hmm. Oh well. Okay, so Rashi has to discuss this phrase here, Shavua Zot, because it's not clear when we're talking about a Shavua, even though normally it refers to a week. Okay, or does it refer to a? There are problems with this. Okay, because as Rashi, I'm going to let Rashi explain. Malay Shavua Zot, fulfill this either this week or the week of this one, right? And it's not this week. It has to be the week of this one, as Rashi's going to explain. Davuku. Okay, so this shvua, right, is connected to the zot. It's a I'm sorry, I'm blocking on the grammatical term. In Hebrew, it would be called smichut, right? It's possessive. Forgive me. It's in a possessive case. In other words, something of, right? That the grammatical form. Shehare nakud bechataf. Why? Because of the chataf and let's go back into this, and that he means here the Shavah, right? It's not Shavua, it's Shvua and Shvua, and that's typical of the smichut case of this particular grammatical case, right? Right? And Rashi calls it a chataf, and he says Perush b'shava, right? He says, we would call it a Shavah. Shavua shel zot. In other words, if we were to say it all out without the smichut, we'd say the 7 of this one. Vehein shivat yemei hamishte. And what this is referring to is the 7 days of the wedding feast. Gemara Yerushalmi, he says that in the Gemara of the Jerusalem Talmud, the Moed Katan, in the tractate called Moed Katan, means a small Moed, of course, is a festival, but what it's referring to is the intermediate days. This tractate deals with the laws of the intermediate days of a festival, where it's not actually Yontef, but it's the in-between days, such as the in-between days of Pesach or the in-between days of Sukkot, right? Ve'if shar lomar, and you cannot translate this, Shavua mamash, that in fact it means a week simply by itself. She'im kain, in other words, it has to be the week of the wedding feast, and not that it's a week. She'im kain, because if this were the case, hayat tzarich linaked behashin, because if that were the case, we would have to point the shin, we'd have to put the vowel under the shin, right? And Rashi calls it a patach, but Ritzono lomar kamatz. That's actually the vowel sign that we'd use as a kamatz. Here's an example of a kamatz. There's a kamatz, if you can. This is a patach right here, the straight line. There's another patach, right? So Shavua is spelled with a kamatz. It would have to be, and it's not a kamatz. But and not only that, Shavua lashon zachar, that in fact the word Shavua is a masculine. It's a masculine word, so it could not say Shavua zot. It would have to say, first of all, it would have to say Shavua, and it would have to say Shavua zeh. Kedichtiv. And how do we know that Shavua is a masculine noun? It states Shiv'a Shavuot. It says 7 Shavuot weeks. Interesting, of course, that the ending is a feminine ending, but there are nouns that have feminine endings, but nevertheless are masculine nouns. Tispor, okay. So Shiv'a is a masculine, the new number system, there are feminine forms, which would be Sheva. Shiv'a is the masculine of 7. And since this is an adjective describing how many weeks, if Shavua was in fact feminine, it should say Sheva Shavuot and not Shiv'a Shavuot, right? So you should count 7 weeks. Lefichach, and for this reason, ein mashma Shavua, okay? So this word cannot mean a week, a regular week, ela shiva, but rather just 7, the number 7, and the French would be septena, right? Like in sept, right? 7, balaz in Old French, and the Yiddish provided here, ein siebentalig maybe, or siebentlik, 7, sieben being 7, right? V'natna, let's make sure I've got this correct here. I want to make sure. V'nitna, and we will give. V'nitna. So, v'nitna lacha. Lashon rabim. He says this is, it's plural. Nitna, we shall give. Kamo nerda. V'nivla. Right? Just like we will go down and we will confuse. V'nisrafa, right? And we will burn, something like that. Afze lashon v'natan, right? So even this, means to give. It has to do with give. Venitna, we will give. That's how you would, conjugate define this verb. Conjugate, I guess. Right. Okay. Gam etzot. Yes, Jocelyn.
Does Shavua also refer to oath or promise?
Yes, that's shvu'ah, right? So the accent is in a different place. But whether or not it's related to the number 7, I am not certain. I could go really way out on a limb and maybe make a suggestion that there is a connection. And I will tell you how. Because the fact that the Sabbath, the Shabbat, is on the 7th day of the week, right, is in a way, and the Shabbat actually is a little foretaste of immortality. And you could say that the Shabbat is, in a way, an oath that God is giving us, that in fact, life, there is the potential of immortality in this lifetime.
So I didn't go in that direction. I went towards, if it's an oath, does it have any reference to Laban's promise, their agreement to give Rachel to?
I don't know. I mean, it doesn't mention that he took an oath. So
Well,
I'm looking at
Shavua.
purely linguistically, you're looking at it contextually. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but no, the wedding feast was 7 days. And I think that number 7 has that there is some connection between the word Sheva and the word Shvuah. Because they are spelt with Shin Bet Ayin. They both have that spelling.
So it's not relevant then, what I'm
I
thinking.
don't believe so. I don't believe so. But in all fairness, I'd need to give it some thought.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I see it more from a linguistic point of view. So let's keep going here. Gam etzot, this one too. In other words, referring to Rachel here. Miyad, in other words, immediately. La'achar shivat yemei hamishter. In other words, as soon as those 7 days of the feast are over, I'm going to give you Rachel. You'll be able to marry Rachel. V'ta'avod la'achar nisu'eha, and so that you can work after you marry her. So it wasn't that he was going to have to marry, he wasn't going to have to work another 7 years before he allowed Rachel to marry Jacob. He would marry her as soon as the feast for Leah was over, and then he was going to have to pay back with another 7 years. So and I think that's important because it is a little bit confusing, and it's possible that we might misinterpret it. And for a long time, I wasn't sure about that, but the Rashi makes it very, very clear. And Rashi, of course, is referencing, traditional understanding of these passages. So, let me find the place. Okay. So we have Vayas Yaakov Chen, and Jacob did so. And he, in fact, he fulfilled the 7 days of Leah, I believe we'd be saying here. Right? Vayiten lo et Rachel, and then after that, Laban gave him Rachel, Bitor Isha, his daughter, to him as a wife. Okay, let's make sure. Okay. Vayiten Lavan LaRachel bito, and Laban gave to Rachel his daughter, et Bilha shivchato, Bilha his maidservant, La l'shivcha, to her as a maidservant. Just an exact parallel of how he had treated Leah. Leah got Zilpah, Rachel got Bilha. So, Vayavo gam el Rachel, and he was intimate also with Rachel. Vayehav gam et Rachel meir. Not only that, though, he loved Rachel more than Leah. Ouch. Vayeavod imo, and he served him. He worked for him. Od sheva shanim acherot, another 7 years. So we're going to see. So the Torah then sort of introduces this dynamic here, this sad issue going on between the two sisters now, that Jacob clearly showed preference to Rachel. Rachel was his beloved. And I can only imagine how painful it must have been for Leah in so many ways. So, but again, I think there's some lessons here for Jacob, at least from a literary standpoint, going on here. And of course, what's actually happening is that the Torah is setting us up eventually for Joseph, and why Joseph would be such a favorite son. And by the way, okay, I know I'm anticipating, forgive me, but of course he's going to lose Rachel. Rachel is going to die giving birth to Benjamin. So Joseph will be the only one. And then, of course, he loses Joseph on top of that. So the seeds of the tragedy in Jacob's life is being sown right now, because had things gone the way Jacob had wanted, right? If Jacob had scripted his life, how many wives would he have had? One. He would have had Rachel. That would have been it. But life didn't go the way he scripted it. And life doesn't go the way we scripted. We don't write the script. So we'll take the Lamed Od Sheva Shanim, another 7 years, Acherot. So again, Od is another, Acherot is also another. So why the duplication, right? Right? So the emphasis of this, and this is from Bereshit Rabbah, Acherot. Okay, so why this Acherot? Hikishan Larishonot. That Acherot, in other words, the word Achar can also mean after, right? After. But he says he links them to the first set of 7 years. Let's go to the next page. Ma Rishonot be'emunah, just as the first 7 years he worked faithfully for Laban. Af ha'achronot be'emunah, he worked those second 7 years, even though he got cheated into having to work those 7 years, he worked them with faithfully. For afalpi, here's exactly Rashi's going to say this, despite the fact sheberamaut ba'alav, that these 7 years came upon him through cheating. So we will stop here, and I will put the place, and this will be a good place, God willing, to pick this up next year.
So even though those 7 years came upon him by cheating,
Yes.
his service as patriarch
Yes.
was done faithfully,
Correct.
even though he got it by subterfuge.
Correct. Yes, no excuse. And maybe, in effect, that this is saying already that something's taking place in Jacob, right? That he's starting to realize he needs to wake up and recognize, And of course, there are many laws within Judaism from the Torah on that talk about how we need to work faithfully for those who employ us, for our employers. We need to be good workers. It's very important. So with this, I'm going to stop the recording.